For decades, he let the music speak for him. The melodies, the harmonies, the arrangements, those were his language. But now, with time behind him and legacy firmly secured, Benny has begun to speak in a different way, more openly, more honestly, and in doing so, he has finally allowed himself to talk about someone he spent most of his life protecting through silence. Annie Frid Lyngstad. To the world, she was 1/4 of ABBA.to fans. She was a voice, warm, grounded, unforgettable. But to Benny, she was something far more complex, far more personal, and far more influential than he ever admitted when it mattered most. And only now is he explaining why. Why did a relationship that looked so calm, so stable, and so deeply connected quietly fall apart? Why did two people who seemed perfectly matched drift away without scandal, without betrayal, without public bitterness? The answer isn't dramatic, that it's something far more human. Before the stadiums, before the flashing cameras, before the pressure of being perfect, Benny Andersson and Annie Frid Lyngstad were simply two musicians navigating uncertain lives. Their connection didn't erupt in spectacle. It didn't announce itself loudly. It grew the way real intimacy often does. Slowly, naturally, almost unnoticed. They understood each other in a way that felt effortless. Both were thoughtful. Both were private. Both carried emotional depth that didn't always surface in words. They shared a creative temperament that allowed silence to feel comfortable rather than awkward. At a time when life felt chaotic, being together felt grounding. Unlike the more visible relationship within ABBA, theirs existed quietly. They didn't seek attention. They didn't perform their love for anyone else's benefit. What they shared was subtle, internal, and deeply personal. And for a while it worked. By the time they married in 1978, ABBA wasn't just successful, it was unstoppable. Their lives were no longer their own. Every day belonged to schedules, obligations, expectations, and an industry that never slowed down. Their wedding reflected who they were. No spectacle, no excess, just an intimate moment in the middle of a life that had grown impossibly loud. They had already seen what fame could do to a marriage. They knew how relentless it could be, and they genuinely tried to protect what they had. But love doesn't exist in isolation. It lives inside circumstances, and ABBA's circumstances were unforgiving. The work never stopped, studio sessions blurred into tours, tours turned into interviews, interviews turned into expectations. There was no space to rest emotionally, no room to process, no pause to reconnect. And for two people who were naturally sensitive, introspective, and emotionally guarded, the constant exposure became exhausting in ways few people could see. From the outside, ABBA looked effortless, joyful, polished, harmonious. But behind that image were four individuals carrying private struggles while trying to appear flawless. Frida carried more than most people realized. Her early life had been shaped by loss and instability. Even in moments of success, she carried a quiet sadness that she didn't easily share. She felt deeply, and she needed emotional presence to feel safe. Benny, on the other hand, processed the world differently. When emotions became overwhelming, he retreated inward. Music made sense to him. Chords obeyed logic. Melodies followed structure. People didn't. Where Frida needed closeness, Benny needed space. Where Frida needed reassurance, Benny needed silence. Neither was wrong. But slowly, without dramatic arguments or obvious fractures, they began drifting toward different emotional needs. Their separation didn't arrive with chaos. It came quietly. No shouting matches, no public confrontations, no betrayal. Just distance. The kind that grows when two people are exhausted, emotionally depleted, and no longer standing in the same place, even if they still care deeply. By 1980, the gap was undeniable. They still respected each other. They still understood each other. But understanding wasn't enough anymore. Their divorce in 1981 reflected everything about who they were. Calm, private, heartbreaking in its restraint. What made it even harder was that their story didn't end there. Because ABBA didn't end there. Most people get space after a breakup. They step away. They heal privately. Benny and Frida didn't have that luxury. They still had to work together, sing together, smile together, stand side by side while millions watched, and they did it with grace. There were no public feuds, no bitter interviews, no attempts to rewrite the past. They remained professional, respectful, and deeply dignified. It's one of the least talked about aspects of ABBA's legacy, and one of the most impressive. Their story proves something uncomfortable but true. Sometimes love doesn't fail because it was weak. Sometimes it fails because life becomes too heavy for it to survive. For most of his life, Benny avoided talking about emotions. He spoke about music instead. Arrangements, harmonies, structure, craft. People mistook that for coldness. It wasn't. It was simply how he protected himself. But age has a way of changing priorities. At 78, Benny no longer feels the need to guard every thought. And when he talks about Frida now, something different comes through. Warmth, gentleness, gratitude. He describes her as steady, thoughtful, musically intuitive in a way that made everything easier. And for someone known for understatement, those words carry weight. Frida didn't just sing Benny's music. She understood it. He would sit at the piano, working through a melody, unsure if it had found its shape. Frida would listen quietly. No interruption. No rush. Then she would hum a line, or suggest a phrasing so subtle it barely seemed like a change. And suddenly, everything made sense. Benny now admits how often he relied on that instinct, how much he trusted her judgment, how deeply her presence influenced his work, far more than audiences ever knew. She didn't dominate the room. She didn't demand attention. She simply delivered every time. Frida's voice carried something rare, not just range or control, but emotional intelligence. She could feel a song before she sang it. She could read the room. She could read Benny. When he disappeared into his own thoughts, buried under chords and arrangements, she brought him back, not with words, but with sound. If one voice gave ABBA brilliance, the other gave it depth. And together, they created something no formula could replicate. Even now, Benny admits he misses that energy, the quiet understanding, the feeling of being musically seen. Their romantic relationship couldn't survive the life surrounding it. But their creative connection did. That bond transformed ABBA's music into something timeless. Benny's precision combined with Frida's emotional grounding created songs that felt human, not manufactured. She turned structure into feeling that he turned feeling into form. Together, they shaped the soul of the band. Frida's story didn't begin with ABBA, and it didn't end with it either. Born in 1945, raised amid loss, she learned resilience early. Music became her refuge long before it became her career. After ABBA, she didn't chase relevance. She explored artistry on her own terms. Solo work, new collaborations, different expressions. She remained dignified, independent, and deeply private. Her voice continued to resonate, not because of nostalgia, but because it carried authenticity. Benny's path was shaped by curiosity and discipline. From his teenage years in Stockholm to global success, he approached music like a craftsman. After ABBA, he didn't stop creating. He expanded, explored, challenged himself. Projects like Chess allowed him to tell longer stories through music, proving that his talent was never limited to pop. His solo work revealed a man still deeply in love with sound itself, not fame. ABBA's rise wasn't accidental. It was built on balance, precision and emotion, accessibility and sophistication, structure and soul. Their music crossed borders because it captured something universal: joy, longing, heartbreak, hope. Even decades later, those songs live on, not as relics, but as living expressions of human experience. Dancing Queen captures freedom and nostalgia in a way few songs ever have. Mamma Mia blends humor and heart with storytelling brilliance. Waterloo marks the moment everything changed. These weren't just hits. They were emotional landmarks. Benny now understands something he couldn't articulate when he was younger. Some people enter your life quietly, they don't demand attention, they don't announce their impact. And yet they change everything. Frida was one of those people. Their marriage ended. Their bond didn't disappear. IT evolved. Because some connections don't fade, they transform. And sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones that last forever, but the ones that leave something timeless behind. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it.